Am I up
Yes,
and
you're
at 'em?
live.
Oh, I'm so excited. Hey, everybody, it's me, it's Herbie. Welcome to a Radical Reset. We've been off for a little over a week just because of the way the holiday worked out. I hope you all had a great holiday. I hope you're all having a happy new year. I hope that life is treating you as well as you could possibly want it to. That all being said, we know that's not the way life works, and let's get into some serious stuff. And today I'm going to talk about I let me back up. First of all, I am a fan of President Trump, generally speaking. And I understand what he wants to do. And I'm a fan, but I'm not MAGA. And the reason I don't identify as MAGA is because I have fundamental disagreements with the president on things like tariffs, which I think are almost universally not smart. Having said that, I don't need somebody to agree with every word that comes out of my mouth or in my head in order to like them. And I think, generally speaking, President Trump, I'll tell you this, in my entire lifetime, and for those of you who are new, I'm 67 years old. I've never seen a better prepared administration coming into office. I've never seen one lay out the entire cabinet in advance. I've never seen, them basically parade their cabinet choices in front of the Senate to get them pre-approved. So when he takes office, he's going to hit the ground running. It's pretty good. But here's let me define the issue that's overhanging it this year. The thing that could really destroy everything and could make President Trump the most unlucky president in history. That's what I'm worried about. That he could be just happens to be the guy that's in office when the poop hits the fan. Now, the national debt is the issue, and I understand that lots and lots of people talk about the national debt. I understand there's lots of people, doom and glooming. We're never going to get out of this. It's going to be the end of everything. And it never is the end of everything. I've worried about the national debt, frankly, for my God, decades. I never, in my wildest dreams, thought we could handle a debt of 37 trillion and adding a trillion every 70 days. But what people will say, and maybe you'll say, is, well, we haven't collapsed yet. But guys,
No, that's a bad answer. It hasn't
well,
happened yet. The the
and
the child hasn't pooped their pants yet.
you know, I'm it historically. There's never, first of all, people who are alive now, like me at my age, my life seems to now. I realize how incredibly fast life goes by. But when you're younger, it feels like a lot longer. And so when you talk about periods of like 50 years since we really or since when he started the welfare state in 1965, and we're talking, 50 years ago, that sounds like we've really been at it a long time and we've been able to do this the whole time. So why worry about what's going to happen later? And the answer is um, 50 years in historic times is a blink of an eye. I was just not to get off the subject because Eric, bring me back if I get too lost because I'm about to go into the dinosaurs.
Okay.
Okay, so the dinosaurs ruled the earth for tens of millions of years in various forms, you know, and we've been around as a species, depending on how you date it, at most a quarter of a million years. Okay. We are a new species. There is nothing to say that we won't be long gone by the time the sun explodes and destroys the earth. We can do this to ourselves pretty easily. You need to appreciate that a 50-year time span is not a very long time span. And we abrogated the Bretton Woods Agreement and went on to a fiat standard in 1971, which means nothing behind our money. I was being fancy. Let's say there's nothing behind the dollar or any other major world currency except faith. It's a giant con game. Con is, by the way, where that term comes from is confidence. Okay, it's a confidence racket. As long as you have confidence that the money is worth something, then it'll be worth something. But if something undermines that confidence, then all bets are off, and that's what happened in Argentina, and that's what's happening now in Venezuela, and that's what happened in Weimar Germany. Is that when the people lose confidence, there's never been a successful fiat currency in history. And whenever you do something, and you've heard me talk about this before, but this is relevant to our discussion today, you have to ask three questions. And the first question is, as compared to what? So when Richard Nixon made the decision to take us off of the gold standard and go to a pure fiat currency, He should have said, what country in history has ever pulled this off? And the answer would be none. Okay, so when you get that answer, then the second question, if you get from there to the second question, would be, well, people say, well, we know how to do it. Okay, show me your data. Show me how you plan to pull this off. And of course, the what's that?
That was my phone. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought it was, very pretty. Anyway,
It's a new sound effect.
I like it. I like it. Let's go with it. So there is no data to support that we can pull this off. And it's and the third, of course, would be, what's this going to cost us? Now that's not relevant to fiat currency, because we're just basically, whenever we say we need money to do this, we just borrow it from ourselves. For you to understand how we do this, and this is a quick review of how the Treasury and the Federal Reserve works. We are borrowing at this moment 50% of our budget. Okay, actually a little bit more than that. And our expenditures on interest alone is already larger than the defense budget. We're spending $1 trillion, and we don't spend $1 trillion on defense. We're spending $1 trillion plus, and it's growing every day, just on interest. Okay, that is an unsustainable period.
Right.
And so President Trump's idea, and I hope it works. Before I criticize it, I'm going to go with, I hope it works. He talks about shutting down the Department of Education. He talks about Doge. He talks about what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and everybody else is doing, and all these great executives. And I think it's all great. And I think they're all doing great things. But all of them have come up in this system of fiat currency. And his plan is we can grow our way out of this. Because if we were to shut down the entire federal government, all of it, the entire welfare state, the Department of Defense, the Department of everything, shut down the White House, shut down the Congress, close the doors, fire all the employees, out the door, we would still be in deficit this year. And the reason for that is Social Security and Medicare. Okay, now I'm going to circle back around to Social Security and Medicare, but Social Security and Medicare are the reason we're in this trouble. Okay, they're the gasoline on the fire, to understand. So Trump's plan is, and I'm going to first point out, well, first of all, before I even get into that, you have to understand something called the Rule of 72. The Rule of 72 means whatever interest rate you're growing at, if you divide that number into the number 72, it'll tell you exactly how many years it takes to double your money. So in other words, if you're earning 10% a year, or you're growing at 10%, you will double every 7.2 years. Now, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, in doing their forward projections, which are never right, and they're always too low, but in their forward projections are using a growth rate of 1.8% for the United States. Trump is saying we can double it or more. We could get up to 5% growth. Now here's why he thinks we can grow out of this. Let me round 1.8 to 2 just to keep the math simple for this example. If we're only growing at 2%, okay, it's going to take us 36 years to double the economy, and we don't have that much time. The deficit, the national debt is more than 100% of our gross domestic product. There's never been a country that didn't end up in a hyperinflation when their national debt exceeded 100% of GDP. Right now, we're not the only ones. Basically, every industrialized nation in the world, we're in a time of incredible danger, because every world currency, every country that's participating in this fiat thing, are way over 100% of GDP. There are some smaller countries that haven't gotten this stupid, but the major industrial countries have definitely done it. So Trump's idea is we can grow the economy and freeze or slow down the growth of the debt. So if we can slow down from $1 trillion every 100 days to $1 trillion every 2 years, let's say, adding to the debt, and we can grow at 5% instead of 2%, then instead of it taking 36 years to double, now I'm going to have to do this math in my head. Okay, 72 by 5, 1, 2, 5. Okay, it'll take 15 years. So, by the way, the reason I look in the air is because that's just the way I think. Don't pay any attention to me. Anyway, so we would be able, if we can double the economy every 15 years instead of every 36 years, then we can maybe keep this con game going and keep people's confidence up as they see progress being made against the debt, and there's less chance the whole thing will implode. And theoretically, that could work. If we could grow faster, that would be great. But here's why we really can't. We have an incredibly mature economy. We're the most mature economy in the world in the sense that how it works is so well ingrained, and we are so huge, and we have so much that we really, it's hard to grow a big country much more. Having said all that, we can certainly get to 5%. And I know that because Reagan got to 5%. In fact, Reagan got even above 5%. And Trump's feeling is if we cut taxes and cut regulation and cut spending, then we'll grow our way out of this. And I hope he's right. I really, really hope he's right. And I will concede that he has surrounded himself with really excellent people by and large. There are a few exceptions, and I'm not going to harp on those. I'll let political pundits do that. But he's setting it all up the right way, but what he needs is time. Now, there's two things that are preying upon us. Number one is in 2035, Social Security and Medicare are going to run out of money. And everybody like me collecting Social Security is going to get a mandatory minimum 20% cut in their income, at least, and that's at current projections, but more like half. If we don't do something about Social Security and Medicare right now, it's going to run out of money in 10 years. And when it runs out of money, and maybe faster because the way we keep adding things into it, and both parties are guilty. I'm not pointing my fingers at Democrats, and I'm not pointing my fingers at Republicans. They're both full of shit. Okay, they've added so much spending into these bills that it's just growing phenomenally, especially Social Security and Medicare spending and Medicaid. I should include Medicaid in that. It's going to have to be cut. Okay, now Trump says not one penny will be cut from Social Security. Not one penny will be cut from Medicare. Not one penny will be cut from Medicaid. I hope he's right, but I think that's just bullshit. And the reason that is, and by the way, I know because I have so many friends, and a lot of my friends are my age. I have lots of friends that when I have this discussion with them and I tell them this is going to have to happen, their instant reaction is I paid in and I deserve what I get. And, I paid in too. In fact, I paid in the maximum. I topped off Social Security every single year. So I got up to the maximum contribution every year I worked. So the bottom line is I understand. But you see, and this is something we're going to all have to get through our heads, there is no trust fund. That is a fiction. That is a political fiction invented by Franklin Roosevelt to sell the idea of taking a federal program at a time, and this is going to seem quaint, when people thought it was disgraceful to accept money from the government. So Franklin Roosevelt said back in 1936, well, we'll tell them there's a trust fund, and this is all based on the money they're investing, and they won't know that it's a pay-as-you-go system, and it'll all work out. And he based that, and I'm not saying he was necessarily wrong at the time. He's just had no foresight, and really, who does have foresight? There were Social Security from day one has been a pay-as-you-go. There are workers paying in, and there's money going out. Those FICA taxes that we all paid during our working years, and that you're probably paying now if you're still working, are directly going into the pockets of people like me immediately. There's no investment going on. Now, what they do is they put IOUs into the trust fund bucket. It's trust funds to ourselves. And what the Treasury does, back to the point I was going to make, is the Treasury says to the Federal Reserve, we need an extra $3.5 trillion this year. And the Federal Reserve then issues, or the Treasury, issues bonds. Okay, and those bonds are put out on the market. But right now, almost no foreign governments are buying our bonds, and our domestic purchases are not enough to buy all these bonds. So who's buying them? The Federal Reserve is. So the Federal Reserve then has to pay for them back to the Congress because they bought the bonds. And where are they getting the money to pay for it? They're printing it up out of thin air, which is why we have inflation, because we're putting too much money into circulation in the economy. Okay.
I have a question.
I was about to ask, am I losing anybody here? But go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the question. Can spending in the Medicare, Medicaid programs come down enough to offset that the surplus gets now reinvested? No. Can that happen?
No. First of all, in a monopoly system. Medicare has a monopoly on what it does. And the government under Obamacare has effectively created a government monopoly for that. And so in a monopoly, there's no motivation for efficiency. There's only a motivation to grow, like any bureaucracy. In Medicare, we're living longer, we're staying alive longer, we're getting well longer, and that's all. Unless that trend reverses, and nobody wants to live less. Take it from me, who just got over a lung tumor, for Christ's sake. It's you want the treatment, but there's no way, and there is no place to invest it. They've never invested it. They take right now today, the federal taxes that are coming out of your paycheck is going directly through the Social Security so-called trust fund. Then the Treasury throws an IOU into it saying, oh, we're going to take this money and spend it now, but we're going to fill it full of Treasury bonds. So that way, they'll know that we're going to pay it back. But it's all a Ponzi scheme. This is the kind of thing that sends people away to prison for a very long time, but the government is doing it absolutely legally. It would be as if you and I had a printing press in our garage and just printed up money. We're going to have to deal with this. Now, what we should do, I'm going to provide the solution. I can tell you exactly what we should do. On Social Security, we should means test it. Why does someone has to tell the truth to the public? Your taxes were just another tax, just the same as the income tax, and you're going to have to get it through your head that you have no right. No, that's the wrong word. It's an unrealistic expectation to believe you're going to get back the money you put in. Okay, or if you get back more, it's ridiculous, because back in 1936, when FDR started Social Security, there were 159 workers for every one retired person, and the average life expectancy was 63. Today, there are 2 workers for every one retired person, and the average life expectancy is 80. That's what's killing Social Security. And nobody wants to reverse those trends, okay? And we don't have enough workers. One of the ironies is, as we shut down the border, we're shutting down extra revenue into the FICA system. Just saying. Okay, so because all of those workers, of course, would have taxes deducted from their checks, and it would go, and most of them don't even file a tax return, so we would get to keep it, and it would help offset some of these expenses. But that's a digression. In the center of it, we're going to have to means test it. Means testing means that if you're wealthy, you shouldn't get it. It should be like we should rename the program. Instead of Social Security, we should call it Old Age Welfare, OAW. And if you need it, you should get it. We're a compassionate society, and I do think it needs to. I was thinking maybe to devolve it to the states, but I think that all that would do is create states that are havens for poor people. So the states that did have their own version of an unmeans tested Social Security, every poor person would move there, and that would, it would be a disaster. So as a national program, I understand Social Security. It's one of the few things I would keep national, but we're going to have to means test it. That's number one. Okay, and on that would do it instantly, because retired people, even if they don't have a lot of income, here's the secret part they don't want to tell you: they have a lot of assets. For example, if their house is paid off, looking at real estate values now, the average retired person's got a net worth of $500,000 just on their house. And they usually have very little debt. And that money, although it's not income, that house could be liquidated in an emergency to pay for bills, or they could borrow against it. Therefore, they should not be getting full Social Security payments. And I can hear them screaming right now into their monitor right this second, but I paid in, but I paid. No, you didn't. Now, I'm not running for office, so I'm going to tell the truth. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No one's paid in. This is a myth. This is fact check me. Okay. No one wants to talk about it, but it's the truth. Okay. Now, on Medicare and Medicaid, what we ought to do is just shut the goddamn thing down and reprivatize the health industry. If we shut down all of Medicare and all of Medicaid, okay, now you understand the reason that Medicare existed or exists and was created in 1965 is because people my age are very hard to insure at a premium that is affordable when we're at the time of our lives when we're more likely to get sick. Like, I've had both my shoulders replaced and a tumor removed from my lung, and I'm not particularly unusual. Almost everybody I know has something. And the older you get, the more of that's going to happen. So I could never afford insurance if it weren't for Medicare. It's a great program. The problem is we just can't afford it. Okay. Instead, what we could do is shut the whole thing down and issue vouchers instead. Okay. So to people my age, depending on their income level, give them a voucher that works the same as cash for the purchase of a private insurance policy with any company they want. And then remove the restrictions on interstate competition, remove the restrictions and the regulation that has strangled out almost every company from the health insurance market. Hundreds of companies would come in, lots of policies would be created, and then just and there should be a law that says the companies have to accept this voucher and the government will redeem the voucher for cash. So nobody's out anything, but let the private market govern the system. And that way, and I don't know why we don't do it. I really don't know why we don't do it. To me, it would be better. You could pick your own insurance. You could pick your own doctors. You don't have to screw around with HMOs, which are just voluntary rationing. Any of you who've ever been turned down, you know that. And Medicaid doesn't need to exist for the same reason. All you got to do is open up the vouchers to a group that otherwise couldn't afford it. Okay, we have to take a quick break. We're going to go away for 3 minutes. Don't go away. Hang in there, and we're going to wrap up after. Let's go.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants...
Ugh, this air conditioner isn't working again. I'm roasting in here.
Hi there. I'm from Canaloo Air. I'm here to fix your air conditioner.
Canaloo Air is a family-owned HVAC company that specializes in residential air conditioning and heating. We offer a variety of services, including installation, replacement, repair, and maintenance. Canaloo Air. We keep your home comfortable all year round. Call us today for a free quote. Why Canaloo Air? Here are the top 5 reasons. Family-owned and operated. We are committed to high-quality service. Our technicians use the highest quality parts and equipment. The business is a member of the Home Advisor Elite Service Award program. And finally, we have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Visit our website, canilooair.com, or call us today, 602-609-3480, to schedule.
This program will inform and educate viewers on the underlying reasons behind many of today's grim and troubling events. You know what makes you mad? You know that there are bad things coming just over the horizon. You watch and listen to lots of podcasts and blogs that give their opinions on what's wrong and what's to come. But nobody is talking about what comes next.
Welcome back, everybody. By the way, I normally, when I start the show, thank Pure 5 Extractions for sponsoring us, but I don't know what was going through my head today, Eric. It must be, I don't know. Anyway, here's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to do a little wrap-up. What I'm talking about is actually not optional. We're going to have to do it. My idea is going to be the only, otherwise, if we don't do what I'm suggesting, okay, if we don't means test Social Security, and we don't shut down Medicare and Medicaid, and instead issue vouchers so people can buy private insurance, which would drastically reduce the cost. Understand, this is why. Let me explain why it would so drastically reduce the cost. Number one, it would introduce competition into the system. Let's start with Medicare and Medicaid. Competition breeds lower prices, not higher prices. Anytime there's competition, prices go down, or sometimes people choose to buy quality instead. There are those people that will pay the price for the best, and there are those people, most of us, who will pay a price for good enough. But if we provide them a voucher where they can buy their own and insurance companies are competing for their business, then they'll improve their service and lower their prices in most cases to attract business. And those that don't will be offering red carpet treatment. And there's some people that will do that and pay more out of their own pocket maybe on top to do that. But that's certainly doable. And that's how you control health insurance costs. Otherwise, you have to do what they're doing now, which is basically ration care. Say to people, how many of you have been turned down for care? How many of you have tried to get something done that you can't get done and ought to be done? That's the only way you can control costs in a monopoly. When there's no competition in a monopoly, that's why the people, It is a delusion that we can have national health care and good service. The people who advocate, like Bernie Sanders, we have to have national health care. It's a disgrace that we don't have national health care. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing. Okay, no country that has it is satisfied with it. It's unbelievably expensive. You can't do it in a country of this size. And even if we did, you'd be getting your medicine with all the care and love that you get at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Okay, like that's what it is in England. That's why most English who can afford it buy private policies. That's what it's like in France. That's what it's like in Spain. That's what it's like in Canada. All of them, that people that can afford it, go outside the system because they suck. That's the part. You can't have a one-payer system that doesn't suck. It's nearly, even in the Scandinavian countries, which have the best one-payer systems, because they have tiny populations that are racially homogeneous, so it's easier to plan when everybody is Norwegian. When everybody has blonde hair and blue eyes, and I know I'm exaggerating, and I know there are dark-haired Norwegians and dark-haired Swedes. I'm making a point, guys. The point is when everybody's the same, basically, the same nationality, the same language, the same religion, the same culture, and they're not immigrants. They're people whose families have lived there since the Vikings. It's easier to plan a system. And even then, Norwegians and Swedes and Finns and Danes who can afford it go outside the system and buy private insurance. Go ahead and fact check me, okay? We're going to have to do this. It's not a choice. And if we don't do this, and if we don't reform Social Security, and if we don't means test it, and if we don't make these things affordable and erase the deficit altogether, okay, here's what's going to happen. Only one of two things will happen, okay? If we don't do it the way I just said it, either we're going to have to default on our debt, or we're going to have to inflate our way through it, okay? Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. Default is just what the name says. We just say we can't pay back all of our bonds. We're just not going to do it. We're declaring a national bankruptcy. And don't think it doesn't happen. Argentina has done it, I think, 6 times. Okay, but it's one thing for Argentina to do it, and it's another thing for the United States to do it, since we have the reserve currency of the entire planet. And if we defaulted on our bonds, instantly the world would be thrown into a depression. Wouldn't be able to describe it. It would be a disaster of overwhelming proportions. And every bank in the world would be insolvent because all the government bonds in all the banks would default. And it wouldn't be just our bonds. Our default would cause a ripple effect. And every bond of every major country, because they all operate the same way we do, basically. I'm being simplistic, but I'm basically correct. I'm not trying to get you lost in a course in advanced economics. I just want you to understand the overview of what's going on. It would be a disaster. We can't default. Okay. So then the other option would be to inflate our way out. And this is what we will do. This is what's going to happen if we don't do what I'm saying, which is basically print up even more money to pay the bills so that everyone gets their check. And then pray to God that it doesn't cause inflation, which of course it will. Okay. Just as Bidenomics has caused a little bit of inflation. I know it all seems terrible, and it is terrible, but it's nothing like what it could be. I mean, I keep picking on Argentina. Argentina is actually doing all the right things right now. And they've dropped their monthly inflation rate when Javier Milei took office was over 50% a month. And now it's about 3% a month, which is a huge improvement. But let's imagine that here in the United States, we had 3% a month inflation. That's more than 36% a year because it compounds every month. You can say it's 12 times 3 equals 36. It's much worse than that. That means that paychecks have to keep up, which means employers have to get raises, which means their prices have to go up, which means no one can afford them, which means the government has to print more money, so there's more in circulation. So do you understand how this becomes a trap that you can't get out of? Once you start hyperinflating, there's no way out, and ultimately you end up in default anyway. Okay? These are our two alternatives. This is what's facing our country. This is the existential threat. Okay? And my worry is, I hope that President Trump pulls it off. I hope he can bring spending down to a somewhat more sustainable level and give time for our economy to double and double again in the time that we were originally, instead of taking 36 years to double, if it's doubling every 15 years, it should double and double again. It should be 4 times larger by the time we get a little more than 4 times larger by the time we get out to that 36 years. And God willing, with bigger economy comes more tax collection. And if we can control our spending, then we can, begin to pay off some of this debt and eliminate our deficit, yada, yada, yada. The problem is politicians. The reason I invented anti-politism, which is, again, read my book. Eric, do you have the graphic to put up the radical reset so I don't have to?
Yeah, just
Okay.
let me play that. Let me play that. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm back. Radical Reset, it's on Amazon. You can get it in all different forms. But in it, I have a system that I've described called anti-politism, which is democracy by lottery. And so instead of serving in office being an ambition, it becomes a duty. Now, I have past shows on this. You can read the book. It's not difficult to understand. But if we don't have anti-politism, we're just going to repeat the same mistake over and over and over because politicians love to buy votes. But what will really happen is we'll lose our democracy. A strong person, a strong man, it'll be a man. I'm sorry. There's just no historic example of a charismatic female leader becoming the leader of a horrible movement like Nazism. It just doesn't happen. It's going to be a man. Some man is going to come out of somewhere and promise to save the day and will become the dictator. And it'll be proof, by the way, historically, democracy 100% of the time ends in tyranny. And it ends in tyranny precisely because of what we're doing and our friends and allies are doing around the world, which is we've become decadent and we are spending money that we don't have on things that are nice to have instead of things that we need. And consequently, we're spending money like drunken sailors. And it's all going to, and in the end, when it spirals out of control, people will freak and panic for the most part. Most people are not level-headed in a crisis. And they will, if you think they glommed on to Donald Trump at least fundamentally is a decent human being. I know some of you are lighting your hair on fire when I say that. But, look, I've watched him interviewed on Joe Rogan. I watched him interviewed on Lex Fridman. I watched him interviewed on the All In podcast. I watched him interviewed on Theo Vaughn. And I'm telling you, the guy is a decent human being. But he's a populist. And a populist means Donald Trump is not a conservative. If you haven't figured that out yet, the Republican Party is no longer the conservative party of the United States. There is no conservative party in the United States. There's the libertarians, but the libertarians aren't necessarily conservative in the sense that libertarians are much more into whatever you want to do in the freedom of your own home is your business, and a conservative would, resist that.
All right, time's up. So, got to ask you this. We got to get some current news. What's happening with Trudeau and Canada?
Oh. Canada is really 3 countries. Okay, this is what people don't get about Canada. It's really 3 countries forced together in a coalition that a lot of Canadians don't want. Okay, so there are the Western provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and British Columbia. And there's one up north, I forget what, and I'm not a great geographer of Canada, but they're the Western provinces. Then there's Ontario, where the capital is of Ottawa, which is primarily English speakers, and it's a very progressive province. And then there's Quebec, who considers itself completely a separate group, but the Francophones, the people that speak French. It's right. Why everyone in Canada has to at least understand French, because every sign is written in both English and French. It's a demonstration of why bilingualism doesn't work, because it fractures the unity of the country. It's why I'm against bilingual education in the United States. I speak Spanish. I think it's great to speak Spanish, but it should not be recognized as an official language. Just saying. Now, these 3 Canadas, when Donald Trump says he'd like to make Canada the 51st state, there are Canadians, particularly in Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan, okay, particularly in those 3 provinces, who would join us tomorrow, okay, as, by the way, you wouldn't lump them all together. That would be the state of Alberta, the state of Manitoba, the state of Saskatchewan. Now, those states, Canada has an interesting, more of a confederation kind of government at the province level, and each of those states are headed by someone called the premier. And the premiers in those states are very conservative, okay? So, and they're very frustrated by all this green energy bullshit, because the Keystone Pipeline was coming from them. There's oil sand fields in Alberta that are enormous. They have enormous resources. They'd like to participate. They would join America tomorrow. Okay, Ottawa would never join them. Ontario would become its own little.
Never.
Never. And the French, who wants them? I mean, and I say that I speak French too. Je parle français aussi. But it's not that I don't love French. It's that they don't mix. You know, it's like putting together oil and water. You know, oil's good, water is good, but they don't go together. It just doesn't work. I love France. I sent my daughter to do a semester of school in France. She speaks French too. I am not here to criticize francophones. I'm just telling you, use your eyes. You know, use your eyes and ears. Not going to work. So Trudeau's been thrown out because he was just a disaster, and he's going to be replaced by a Quebecois, a Quebec. That's like being a Quebecian, but they call it Quebecois in Canada. His name is Pierre Poilievre, and Pierre Poilievre is a populist, much like Trump. It'll be interesting to see what Trudeau's resigned. Poilievre is going to end up being prime minister after a lot of parliamentary machinations, and we'll see what happens from that point forward. They should have a good relationship. I would make a fairly prohibitive bet that we're not going to level sanctions against either Canada or Mexico, and that Poilievre in Canada in particular is going to end up being a good friend of Donald Trump. That's just what I think.
Okay.
Now, I could be wrong. Now, the Mexican president's a different story altogether. She's a communist. And I'm not saying that like some people say that just to be nasty. She really is a communist. She's the real deal. And we're going to have a problem. Now, Mexico is cooperating with us on the border so far. And the other day, she announced that she would accept even non-Mexican foreign nationals back into Mexico to send them back down south and so on and so forth. But it's more complicated than that because we have Iranians and Afghans and all kinds of crazy shit crossing our southern border now.
And the Chinese. Yeah.
And the Chinese.
Another element for the speed round.
Okay.
Israel. It's been quiet. Let's open it up. Let's open it.
Israel's just counting the days till Trump takes office. That's all.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's all they're doing. They're marking time. Now, there's going to be a major attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, a lot of people think that it'll happen before January the 20th because they'll want to get it out of the way before Trump. I don't really understand that logic. I think it'll take place shortly after January the 20th. And I think it'll be a coordinated attack between the United States, and I think there are two groups of people that are going to get the shit kicked out of them as soon as Trump's inaugurated. Group number one is going to be the Iranians. The nuclear program is going to be annihilated because we have the kind of weapons that can do it. Okay, Israel doesn't have the kind of bunker busters we have. We've got them, and we're going to blow these guys. Forget it. Okay, it's over, and they know it. That's why they've been so quiet lately. Have you noticed how quiet they've been in Iran?
Very
quiet. Because they're shitting bricks. You know what I mean?
Square ones too.
Yeah, big, painful, bloody square ones. You know. Now the Houthis, who must be led by the biggest bunch of retards on the planet, they're threatening international shipping, and the United States. The one thing that we should be doing at all times, because it's in our interest and the world's interest, is police the trade lanes. Most of the world's goods move by sea. And the Houthis, because the Suez Canal is at the top of the Red Sea, and it comes down and it goes right by the Houthis, and there's a narrow, it's not as narrow as it looks on a map, it's pretty goddamn big, but there's an area where they're firing missiles and ships all the time. We have to put an end to that bullshit. Okay. Yeah. And Joe Biden has been very timid. He's done little pinpricks. I predict Donald Trump remember, I don't know. Well, you're old enough to remember. Remember the first day of Desert Storm when they had the pictures and the bombs were going off over Baghdad? Yeah. Well, yeah, we're going to do that to the Houthis. We're not going to invade. We're not going to try to take over the country. Donald Trump is not stupid enough to re-engage us in nation building. We'll just let them figure it out. Let the Saudis figure it out. By the way, the Saudis hate the Houthis. They hate them. And they've been trying to kill them forever. So it'll probably be a coordinated attack between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, oddly enough, because ultimately Saudi Arabia is going to join the Abraham Accords now once Trump becomes president. And there is one more group that ought to be shitting blood, and that is Hamas. Now, when Trump says all hell will break loose, I've been trying to imagine what he means by that. We could easily, Israel long ago could have killed the entire Hamas army, with what's left of it. The problem is there are living hostages theoretically down in those tunnels. And if we blow up it, if Israel or the United States does what it has the capability, that's why Israeli soldiers are fighting in the tunnels. That's why they're going. That's what makes the criticism of all those idiots on campus so stupid. Israel's bending over backwards, trying not to kill civilians. And by the way, the 45,000, that's Hamas's numbers. That's going to turn out to be like 5 times more than really got killed. And in the end, we're going to find out that the ratio of soldiers to civilians is 1 to 1. And usually it's like 10 civilians for every 1 soldier in every other war that's ever been fought. Sometimes 100 civilians. Just like in World War II, we bombed whole cities and killed shit tons of civilians with no regard. It could have been done before. So I'm wondering what Donald Trump is thinking when he says all hell is going to break loose. I don't really know what he means.
Okay.
The other, so I don't know. But whatever it is, let's hope it's creative and interesting, because enough is enough. What I would do, and see, I don't think Trump will do this, but when you're the president, sometimes you have to make terrible, terrible decisions. And you have to weigh bad versus worse, not good versus bad. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I think what he'll do, this is what I would do. I would go to the table one more time, and I'd say, surrender and turn over the hostages, and we'll give you free passage out or die. We're going to declare the hostages casualties of war. We're going to assume that they're all dead since you never produced them anyway, and we're just going to fill in the hole. And that's going to be the end of it. Yeah. Okay? And now it's a hell of a risk to take, because you're really rolling the dice on that. But if they don't believe it, they're stupid. That I think is the only way I can figure out how to end this. Or just keep the Israelis fighting tunnel to tunnel, which is, I can't imagine anything more dangerous. But, okay.
Okay, last thing, and then we're going to close. Bitcoin, it's here again.
Bitcoin, which I love, and Bitcoin, which has gone up, and Bitcoin, which is going to have guys like Howard Lutnick, and I know these names. Let me stop. I'm going to start reciting names that's going to mean nothing to anybody. But hear me loud and clear. David Sachs is the Bitcoin czar in the administration. Bitcoin is the greatest threat to our con game. That's what's going on. See, another thing that could happen is people could start actually, if they lose confidence in the money, then quietly a lot of people can obtain Bitcoin and begin spending Bitcoin to other people that accept it. And if it becomes a competitive currency, then we no longer are the reserve currency of the world. And if we're no longer the reserve currency of the world, we're fucked. That's the only thing that's saving us now. The only reason we're not in total meltdown is because most other countries are holding dollars in reserve instead of gold. Okay, but if the dollar is no longer unique, Bitcoin doesn't even have to turn into a currency. If it becomes a reserve, if countries say, you know what we're going to do, I'll give you a good example. El Salvador owns a shit ton of Bitcoin. I know they're a tiny country, but their president was very farsighted, and he bought a ton of Bitcoin at under 30,000. And now he's feeling pretty smug and smart. Now he's a tiny country, but if more countries do that, and believe me, the Chinese are obtaining Bitcoin, the Russians.
Hold on. Take a pause, real quick, in like 3-4 sentences. Explain what cryptocurrency is for our new viewers, because they may not know what that means.
Okay. Cryptocurrency. First of all, forget everything but Bitcoin. All those other coins, all those other alternatives, all have a purpose, but none of them are a currency except the so-called, like Tether, the so-called coins that are matched to the dollar. But that's just for the purpose of, trust me on this, the only one you need to know about is Bitcoin. And what makes Bitcoin, in my opinion, the hardest currency ever invented. When I say hard, it means there's no other way to get more Bitcoins to make it lose value. In other words, there's lots of gold on the earth, and there's lots of gold in the solar system, and there's lots of gold in the universe. Gold is on the periodic table. And it's not as it's good, but Bitcoin, there's only 21 million Bitcoins. We're going to reach that limit shortly after the year 2100, and that's it. So, and it can't be changed and it can't be altered. It's realer than the dollar because there's no Federal Reserve just to print them up as they go. That's the easiest way to understand it. And so the reason Bitcoin has gone up to 100,000 is there's nobody that can print up more Bitcoins to try to sell more Bitcoins that can't be done. The algorithm that runs Bitcoin was set up in such a way that it can't be hacked, it can't be changed, it can't be altered. So that's why Bitcoin could be our ultimate undoing, even though it's a wonderful thing. In the long run, it's going to be better, but in the short run, sooner or later, we're going to wake up. See, here's what I think, Eric. I think Trump knows all of this. I think all of his advisors know all of this. And I think they sit around in a room and they're praying to God that what they're doing is going to work, because otherwise we're all fucked. That's what it really comes down to. Trump has said often enough, he's referred to the debt in such a way as I believe he knows what's going on and understands it and understands the position that we're in. And he's going to try to, in his big, beautiful one bill or whatever I forget what he's doing, this whole thing he's coming up with. If it works, no one will be happier than me. Okay? I mean, no one. But, don't count on it. That's all I'm saying. Hedge your bets. And now I'm going to wrap up. The best way to hedge your bets, by the way, is to buy some Bitcoin. Okay? Buy some Bitcoin and buy some gold and put it away and ride out the storm that may be coming, because Trump has a short timeline here. And this is the last thing I want to say, Eric. I didn't bring it up today, but China is preparing for war, and not because they think they're going to win, but because the country is imploding. And this is what dictators do when they're going down the drain. They try to distract away from their mess they've made over here by starting a new mess over there. And they might attack Taiwan. They might try to block. I think it's more likely they'll try to blockade Taiwan, and then it'll become an issue of how are we going to try to break the blockade. And certainly Trump will break the blockade. And certainly it's not just Trump. Japan will break the blockade. The Philippines will break the blockade. The Australians will break the blockade. And we could end up in a regional war in the Southern Pacific that could undermine everything. So listen, pray to God. Pray to God it all works out the way Trump wants it to. Everyone should be rooting for Trump. He gets it. He knows what's going on. His plan is a Hail Mary pass. And if we don't score, we're screwed. That's all I got to say. Now that I've said all of that, Happy New Year.
You got it all backwards.
Listen, guys, there's no percentage in pessimism. You just have to, but there's such a thing as objective reality. I'm not telling you to worry and worry and worry. I'm telling you to prepare for what could be an eventuality. That's what I'm trying to do. And stop repeating bullshit. Stop saying things like, I paid into Social Security. It's bullshit. I know you did. I understand. I did too. Get over it. Okay? It's as simple as that. Okay? And if we don't get over it, well, I'm not going to, I could repeat myself for the 83rd time, but I'm going to let it go. Thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget to pick up a copy of A Radical Reset on Amazon. I have workable, and I don't like to use the word solutions because there are no solutions, only trade-offs, but much better alternatives to virtually everything. And what would be if we lived in an objective, logical world, which,